A good Tuesday to you on this July 5th. Jesperson and Hicks in studio on in our neck of the woods. Another rainy morning.
A beautiful summer July day.
I'm remaining as positive as possible. I actually don't mind the rain at all. Love the rain.
I don't either. I like it, yeah.
I don't love when it comes, I don't know what it feels like. It's been 75 days in a row.
I was just saying, I think this has got to be a record. I can't remember the last summer here in Alberta where we had this much rain in the first 2 months of summer. So.
I should be careful what I say on the record because I've not yet actually checked the data, but I would assume...
I believe it's a record.
I believe it probably is a record. You can mark that. But I'm going to assume that wildfires, the numbers are probably down, and maybe the intensity is down. I hope so, considering the amount of precipitation that we've seen. But I don't know. It just kind of feels like I feel like this is a great morning for you to settle in. You've already you're either watching us live. Thank you for that. Maybe you're streaming us on the Mixlr audio app. Maybe you're catching this later, and we're grateful for that. You're kind of settled in. It's maybe one of those days where you're going to like sort through some files, get the things done around the house, maybe organize your lazy Susan in the kitchen. If you weren't working today, John, how would you be spending this rainy day? What would be your approach?
I usually follow my wife's lead these days, but on a rainy day, she grabs, a green tea. She puts on an old flick, something to calm her, maybe Office Space or an old Billy Madison flick, and just cuddle up with the pets, yeah.
I like it. It's a great day for binge-watching TV. It's a great day for catching up on episodes of Real Talk you may have missed. Coming up today, we'll check in with Joyce Arthur. She's the founder and executive director of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. She's going to join us live from Vancouver in just a little bit. And then we're going to talk to Dr. Gillian Petit. She's an economist, a researcher with the School of Public Policy out of the University of Calgary, and they've got a new piece out today. I feel like, and I know that I assume Dr. Petit would not be offended by this. This is just the context of teeing up the conversation. The level where she and her colleagues think they talk about things like de-indexation and tax rates and all that kind of stuff. It's a little too much for me to wrap my mind around.
It's highbrow.
So corresponding with her yesterday, I said we'd love essentially if you could just dumb it down for the rest of us that are paying attention to things like our own pocketbooks, our own bottom lines. We see costs going up. You can't ignore that stuff.
Yeah.
But bigger picture, what are the implications and what are researchers suggesting would be intuitive government policy, et cetera. So it should be a really great conversation. That coming up in about a half an hour. Plus the Leading Edge presented by our friends at Leading Edge Physio. We'll take a look at a group or a person that's really sort of raising the game in their own backyard. But this show is happening because of sponsors that have been with us from the very beginning. That includes the team at Bitcoin Well. And right now they want us to remind you that it's actually never been easier if you are inclined to buy Bitcoin, if that's something that you want to make sure that you're going to do, obviously, as quickly and as safely as possible. You can sign up at bitcoinwell.com right now using e-transfer. And so basically it takes a couple of minutes to set up on your first buy, but everyone after that, you just do it directly from your banking app. It's the ultimate one-touch Bitcoin buying experience. So there's a lot of videos on their website you can check out how to use, guide the fastest way to buy. It's bitcoinwell.com, or you can link to them directly under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Also taking a look at our email inbox today. It's wonderful to hear from Real Talkers. You let us know what you're thinking about, what you're hearing or seeing on the show, what you'd like to see more of on the show, how you're processing some of the conversations that we've had. We've got one here from Jill into talk at ryanjesperson.com. She says, I can't believe, she's talking federal politics this morning, I can't believe conservatives seem to be buoyed up, elevated, excited, geared up, energized by the number of folks like me who've signed up for a membership. People aren't joining the party because they're super excited by what the conservatives are offering. There's no excitement or energy. It's fear, she says. I'm sure there are a lot of folks like me who joined in a desperate attempt to save the party. And then on the other side, this is interesting on the heels of our conversation yesterday with Charles Adler. Appreciate him joining us every Monday. She says on the other side, you have many others who joined. They see an opportunity for populists to take over a long-standing party here in Canada. What part of those two scenarios seems like something to be celebrated? If I was hosting a party and everybody jumped into the pool, I wouldn't consider it a sign of an exciting event if folks have all jumped in to save somebody who's drowning. And I like how she uses her words. She says, and if I put a Confederate flag outside my house and all the local racists turned up to party, I also wouldn't call that a success. I truly have no idea what conservatives excited by the membership numbers are smoking. How about Adler yesterday? Inhaling, mimicking the inhale in breaking down Pierre Poilievre's Barnwood video.
I don't want to say it, but I'm going to make it into a GIF.
Yeah. Well, people were asking for it. They want to see.
We can just throw it under in the comments on his tweets.
More than anything, I mean, he's been asking us to send him a Real Talk snapback cap. He wants to get one. You can find those under our merch page, and maybe I mean it's legal now. Although I don't know if you can mail it across. I don't know if you can mail it across provinces.
I don't think you can.
We could send him some pre-rolls, and then we could just get him smoking on the show for real. See how that would go. We could call it. It would be a special feature, like Adler sparked up.
Then his critics would really take a bite.
Yeah, I wonder if he'd care. I suspect he might not. Gillian goes on to say, I don't get what conservatives excited by these membership numbers are smoking. In the context, you remember the Pierre Poilievre camp said that they've sold more than 300,000 memberships, and the number's probably up. At least their claim would be up. And I'm not saying that I don't believe them, but it would probably be. This was from a few weeks ago, right? 311,000, I think they said. And the next closest, I think it was the Schray and the Brown camps. One of them was like, yeah, we're not going to say how many we've sold. And the other was like, yeah, we're about half of that. I think it was Patrick Brown. So, it puts into context, but you're still talking 500,000 people that have been engaged, if you will, into the process. Gillian doesn't know, she says, what people excited by these numbers are smoking. She says, I live in the most conservative province in Canada. Not a single person I know has mentioned the leadership race. They don't care. They're not excited by it. I agree with her. She says most folks are just waiting to see if Poilievre wins or not. Some are going to vote for any leader. Others won't vote for him. Many wonder how badly the party will split. She says, overall, looking at it, more than 500,000 new members, some mounting a rescue mission, some preparing for a hostile takeover. It's not good news for conservatives because when it's all said and done, you ain't fitting those two groups under any big tent. That from Jill. So I appreciate that take. It's an interesting one. That whole idea of the big tent, we're going to be talking to other candidates, leadership candidates for Alberta's provincial conservative leadership race as well. Mm-hmm. We just heard from Danielle Smith's team. They're going, she wants to come on next week. We've talked to Rebecca Schultz. We've talked to Raja Insani. We've talked to Leela here. There's a whole bunch of people that want to lead that party. And you look at some of the messaging that's coming up from some of those candidates. Charles chimed in on Brian Jean's comments over the weekend. If you missed the Adler interview yesterday, make sure you download it. But Adler was talking about, Brian Jean says, yeah, COVID-19 has killed people, but so has the vaccine and so has lockdowns. And whether or not that's going to be palatable to people, that type of leadership, that type of statement, that type of position, if you will, once the leadership race is done, and now you're just talking about governing, right? Whoever wins that becomes premier. Whoever wins the conservative leadership race federally, automatically, obviously, leader of the official opposition. And people will say, taking a look at it, potentially, the Prime Minister of Canada. And so where are those positions taken? And I appreciate Jill getting us thinking on that. You can respond if you like. Maybe it's sort of a, what do I want to call it? Like a regular, like a grounded type approach like Jill takes in her email, or maybe it's with a flamethrower. Maybe you want us to read it on Friday as part of our trash talk feature presented by Local Environmental.
Varying points of view.
Yeah. We haven't even got into the shooting in Chicago yesterday. I don't even know how to wrap my mind around that. In Highland Park, you've probably heard by now, a 4th of July celebration. Obviously, 6 people dead, like 30 people injured, 6 people dead. Again, a gunman on rooftop. Fits the formula, right? Young, white male. And fits that mass shooter formula.
It's so, you go on Twitter, it's so close to home now. I saw someone just post a picture who was there. Blood all over their face, down there, a woman down the front of her dress, and she just said, this happened at a parade where I feel safe every year. So
there's also an interesting angle on the reporting of it and on the public comments of it where people say that stuff's not supposed to happen here. Highland Park is an affluent neighborhood. There's a lot of money there. And then people are pushing back going, well, what do you mean it's not supposed to happen here?
It's supposed to happen anywhere.
What's that supposed to mean? And then the gunman taken into custody by police without incident, peacefully, not 90 shots fired, right? Not a couple of rounds into his back, not blown away sitting in the driver's seat. People rhetorically wondering why that is as well. I, to be quite honest with you, and this is my real talk for the day, have nothing new to offer in the context of conversations around mass shootings in the United States.
It's burnout. We've all got burnout from it. We're just
horrible.
We're numb to it.
Absolutely horrible. I was talking to a pal the other day, growing up, not necessarily growing up, but early in my career in broadcasting and dreaming. I don't know if you were the same, John. Like, you've people know that you did FM morning shows a lot. You've been a media personality for a long time. Did you dream of being the Miami FM morning guy or the New York FM morning guy?
Going down and getting that money in the States.
Right?
Yeah.
I was going to go Red Deer, Calgary, Vancouver, Boston.
LA.
Or Vancouver, San Diego, KTLA. I wanted to go work down there. Yeah. We've got cousins down there, family down there. I was talking to a friend who works in media over the weekend. Yeah. He goes, you think you'd still want to go move down to the States? I said, I honestly don't know.
I was born in Dade County. Not a lot of people know
Florida.
This. Miami. Mm-hmm. And I was born there, I'm going to date myself, but in the 80s. And Dade County in the 80s, during the drug wars, was a dangerous place. And my mom was like, it was less dangerous then. Than
it feels like
now.
They're all dangerous places now in the U.S.
It was, at least you knew where the events were happening and who was involved. Now it's just, take your pick. It's going to happen randomly.
And people will say, well, there's 350 million people and yada, yada, yada. I'll tell you, if I was living down in the U.S., and not to say it can't happen here, but it doesn't happen here. I mean, and this is not, again, we've had these conversations on the show before where we say, hey, we got to be careful as Canadians. And we're about to talk to Joyce Arthur about abortion access. And so there's kind of, I guess, a segue here, taking a look at American politics and American developments versus Canadian ones. But we have to be careful that we don't look down our noses at Americans all the time and say, well, thank goodness it's not like that here.
Not at all. I was proud to be from America until about 5 years ago.
I don't know if you're waking up in the United States and it's time to send your daughter off to summer camp, or it's time to send your son to preschool or to grade 12, or you're going to go show up at work, and it doesn't really matter where you work, or a restaurant or a church or a movie theater or wherever. Is it always? I mean, we have Americans that listen to this, that subscribe to this. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have an email, like honestly, and I'm asking this in a sincere way. Is it always kind of in the back of your mind? Are you always, and you can't even say looking over your shoulder all the time, because, would a 4th of July parade have been the time that you would have expected to have somebody opening fire on a crowd of people? I just can't even, and this is not helpful. What I'm doing is not helpful to sit there and go, well, what can you do? What are you supposed to do about it? But what do you say now that was any different than the last shooting? That was any different than the one before that?
I think before Columbine, we didn't think it would happen in a school, let alone numerous times a year. You know what I mean? So it's just, I don't.
Dwayne says real life is what we thought was only in the movies, right? Yeah, Brad, divide the number of mass shootings in the States by 10. It's still way more than here. It's true.
It is, yeah.
Christy says Highland Park, a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. Brad, by the way, goes on to say in another shooting in Philly. He says, thankfully, no deaths, I believe. And honestly, this is maybe not great for me to admit. I didn't even hear about the one in Philly. Can you imagine if there's a shooting? I mean, we just feel like we're in these small towns up here in Canada, right?
Yeah.
And not to say there hasn't been tragedy and mass shootings, and there have been, and people have been targeted at houses, at mosques, synagogues, and people. It does happen. Let me be clear.
100%.
But if someone discharged a firearm in our city, we hear about it.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like we see over our shoulder every day. Every few weeks we see another shooting, and it's kind of like we just go on with the show. Whereas, a few years ago, 5 years ago, we'd stop and we'd look and we'd report on it. Now it's just happening so often.
Yeah. Sharon says she has friends and family in the States. Says I worry about them every day. How do you not? Honestly, and I don't think that makes us to use a bit of an old school word, it doesn't make you a worry wart, Sharon. It's kind of like you pay attention to the news cycle and you see what's going on. How can you not think about it? Send us your thoughts on this. I don't have anything profound to offer. I just I think of the people, the stories, the personal stories. They're not naming the gunman anymore. They don't want to show the gunman anymore. I understand that.
Yeah.
They want to talk about the victims of these shootings. It's like an old fella that was visiting family from Mexico. There was a guy in a wheelchair that witnesses had said he told his caregiver or whoever was with him, accompanying him, he didn't want to go to the parade, but he had to go anyway because he had mobility issues. And they were it's just all these every single person has a story. These numbers, we go, it's almost like it's scoreboard. It's horrible, right? Oh, 6 dead, 30 injured. You go, yeah, 6 and 30. That's pretty bad. these are people with names and families and, 6 times. And not to mention, you say someone's injured. Injured could be a bullet through your spinal cord. Injured could be your life's screwed forever.
And again,
and then the ripple effect on all these families.
We talked about it yesterday. I don't envy you. Like, how do you explain to kids what's going on today and how, you need to be prepared to get under a desk at school and you need to be prepared if this happens. And talking to the sergeant yesterday when he was here, and just like all the things you have to tell kids nowadays. It's just, I don't envy you.
What a
having
fascinating
a new baby
conversation
and a young son
that was with Sergeant Kerry Shima, who joined us yesterday as well, RCMP. He's an RCMP member, but he works with this Project Alerts ICE unit, Internet Child Exploitation Unit. I really appreciated the sergeant's candor in that interview.
He did.
Right? He goes, listen, there's so much going on with regards to child exploitation online. We can't keep up with it. He says he told us last year, he said they had to develop a triage protocol to take a look at the most serious stuff. He says we're not pursuing things that should be pursued because we don't have the horsepower. They don't have the bandwidth to do it. It was... You got to check that interview out.
Lots of comments online about people
we got a lot of emails on that too.
Saying this is a must-listen to interview. It really...
And I think maybe as early as tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow, we actually had a few people that are advocates that work with children and families and schools and things like that to educate kids on things like social media and some of the one of the guys that wrote in, and I need to do a bit of a background check on him first before we welcome him to we want to know who we're talking to, but this guy, he's a TED talker and everything, so it appears like he's got his beans in a row. He's got some pretty strong stances. He says, Ryan, there's a few things you didn't touch in your interview yesterday that you need to get to, different angles.
I knew people would
what's the appropriate age to get a kid on social media?
Back,
Or not to get a kid, to allow your kid to be on social media. What's the appropriate supervision level for parents? What's the, with regards to accessing your kid's tech or devices, what are the family rules?
I don't envy you as a new dad again, but it's like we were saying yesterday, there needs to be a course for parents these days.
Yeah.
Just to navigate the internet and keep your kids safe.
Well, let's make sure we get to Joyce Arthur here in just a second. But, we move on, and on this show, we'll touch down on an issue. It doesn't mean that we've now wrapped it up with a bow. We put it back on the shelf. We want to hear from you. These are ongoing conversations. Before we get to Joyce, let's talk about this. This is really neat. There's something going on in our hometown. You may have heard it's the biggest mall in the world. At least at some point it was, and certainly a huge draw. Millions of visitors every year to West Edmonton Mall, but there's a very special one this week. That's right, on Wednesday, July 6th, that's tomorrow, Maya will become the first mayor of the mall. This is a partnership between West Edmonton Mall and our friends at Local Environmental. This is so cool. They're working with Adaptabilities. It's a charitable organization that provides unbelievable opportunities for people to live their best lives, to experience things that they might not otherwise experience. When Maya is introduced as the inaugural mayor of the mall tomorrow, she and her family are going to enjoy a one-of-a-kind experience tailored specifically to her interests. That means transportation. West Edmonton Mall Toyota is going to help them out with that. VIP access to West Edmonton Mall attractions, a shopping spree at her favorite stores, and a night at Fantasyland Hotel. Both West Edmonton Mall and Local Environmental Services place a strong emphasis on supporting the local economy, the broader community, and this is a really neat opportunity through their Mayor of the Mall charitable program. Congratulations to Maya. We wish you all the best in your adventure tomorrow. You can follow along on Local Environmental's social media channels, and you can also, if you'd like, join them in person. Cheer her on at the Local Environmental Services Community Center at West Edmonton Mall. That's tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. We'll show you some of the highlights a little bit later on this week. We're super excited for Maya. Our friends at Park Power also wanted to remind you, if you go to their website, parkpower.ca, you can do so much more than just compare rates. I know I talk about comparing rates a lot because quite frankly, I want you to save some money. But if you keep scrolling down, you're going to find some great resources, including their blog. And if you go to their blog, you can learn a little bit more. Check this out. They have informative YouTube videos and all that. But the government of Alberta has a new electricity rebate program. There's been some scams, so-called phishing scams related to this. You want to protect yourself? You want to have all the information that you need regarding this electricity rebate program. You can find it today at parkpower.ca. And our friends at Kubi Energy, it was wonderful. I was chatting with them yesterday. They're hiring. They wanted me to reiterate that. They said, listen, our team is always growing. Why? Because more and more people are tapping into solar. Well, why are they doing that? Because the federal government's just announced a $40,000 interest-free loan for homeowners to install solar or other energy efficiency measures. $40,000 interest-free. Plus, if you live in our home city of Edmonton, you can also get $9,000 off. I mean, in addition to the $5,000 rebate from the federal government, you got that $4,000 from the city of Edmonton, $9,000 off plus $40,000 interest free. It means more and more people are achieving their sustainable energy goals now, maybe ahead of schedule. You can get your free quote today or apply to join the team at Kubi by visiting them online at kubienergy.ca. Conversation continues in the United States, obviously, but around the world about women's access to the human right of health care. This on the heels of, obviously, the U.S. Supreme Court essentially reversing a landmark decision, the Roe v. Wade decision. I'm pretty sure that you all know what I'm talking about. Of course, Canadians are paying close attention because while it may not yet be happening in Canada, there are signs that a reversal like this or a change in access to health care could be on the horizon. Lord knows thousands of people are lobbying for it. Keeping an eye on all of this is Joyce Arthur. She's the founder and executive director of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, which protects the legal right to abortion on request. Before founding the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, about 15 years ago, Joyce ran the Pro-Choice Action Network in BC for a decade or so. Returning to Real Talk live from the West Coast. Joyce, it's nice to see your face again. Thanks for making time for us this morning.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
The last time you and I spoke, you'll remember this document had been leaked, and people were saying they believe that the U.S. Supreme Court's going to rule in this direction. And we talked about what that might mean. Now, a couple of months later, it's hard to believe it's actually happening, but it is, and it's got millions of people wondering what's next. Where's your head at right now?
Well, I mean, first of all, this decision, the fact that it's actually come down basically unchanged from the draft decision, it's really, disgusting, if I can use that word. It's just appalling because it's a really profound violation of human rights. We're talking about half the population of the United States has had its fundamental rights torn away from them. It's not just about abortion. It's about, women's health care in general, bodily autonomy, the right to conscience, all these rights are affected. And I can't even imagine the terror and the heartbreak that people are going through down in the States in terms of, rushing around trying to find care, or having to make travel arrangements, or maybe not being able to travel. It really is just heartbreaking.
Are you already seeing, I want to, just to be honest with you, and I suspect you and I can just bounce around. I want to talk about what you're seeing in the U.S. and then what you're seeing in Canada as well. But there are, I think, some obvious implications here, including people talking about maybe cross-border travel for people seeking abortions in Canada. Are you keeping an eye on those developments? Is this something you think that could or will happen? Or is this something that maybe in some circumstances already is happening?
It will happen. I don't think it's started yet. I know there's been inquiries to clinics and to the helplines up here in Canada about, our ability, our capacity to help, whether it's possible. Of course, people can come up here for health care, so nothing is stopping them except they need a passport and they need money to pay for the procedure. So that's going to be the biggest barrier for most Americans, I think, who probably don't have a passport, especially low-income Americans. So we're actually going to see, I think, a relatively small number of Americans trying to come up here. I don't know how many that will be exactly. But, I think that the first priority for the Americans is there's a lot of support networks already in the States helping people travel and make arrangements and pay for the procedure. So the first choice will be to try and get them across to another state. That would be a lot easier. But there might be some circumstances where it could be the best option to come to Canada, especially for people in the border areas. And if people have means, then they can fly from anywhere up to Canada. So we might see an influx of some Canadians. But what we're worried about here is that even a small number of Canadians could overwhelm our healthcare system. America has 10 times the population, 10 times the abortion rate as well. So that could definitely be an issue. And we are really worried about that in terms of how it could affect access to care for Canadians, because we don't have enough abortion access for Canadians already. People have to travel from the north and from rural areas. So how can we make sure that we can help Canadians first before we can actually start helping Americans?
Yeah, and I think that's an important conversation to have as well, right? It's not as though every Canadian has access to healthcare they need right now, and the only question is whether or not the Canadian healthcare system or provincial healthcare systems could absorb increased pressure from the United States. There's a parallel conversation, arguably, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but more relevant or more important to Canadians about their own access to healthcare. Has this story out of the United States impacted that conversation in Canada? Have you noticed that?
Well, I think people are generally just really concerned about maybe losing their rights here, and as well as access for Canadians and for Americans. I think we hear things from, for example, like New Brunswick and some other provinces that really don't have a very good healthcare system in place. There's so many gaps, so many holes and inadequacies, and for not just for abortion care, reproductive care, but all care. So there's that as well. And provinces seem to be inequitable in how they deliver healthcare. So I think, this actually brings to light that there's a huge role for the federal government to play here, not just for abortion care, but other care, in trying to equalize healthcare and standards and accessibility across Canada. They have the Canada Health Act, which is a federal law that's supposed to guarantee universality and full funding and accessibility no matter where you live. And I think that needs to be much better enforced. And speaking of like abortion care, reproductive health care, they could do things like instruct the provinces to invest more in reproductive health care, expand the capacity of existing abortion clinics and that kind of thing. Some of the provinces wouldn't be able to do that because of lack of funding. Well, the federal government has the power to increase the federal health transfer payment, because currently I think the federal government gives about 30% of the provincial healthcare budgets to the provinces. They could increase that and attach some strings to it. So I would hope that the federal government can step in and try and, do a much better job with the Canada Health Act than they have been.
Joyce, as mentioned in your introduction, you've been involved in advocacy efforts for, the better part of 25 years. Have you ever seen a national or international conversation about access to abortion like you've seen in the last couple of months? How are you wrapping your mind around this? It seems like typically what was perceived, maybe not by you and in your circle, but my understanding as a sort of a civilian was that this was one of those taboo topics. You didn't hear a lot of talk radio shows on abortion. Now everybody's talking about it. They're talking about it over coffee.
Yeah, there's really been an explosion. And certainly this is the biggest kind of explosion of media interest since I've ever seen. But we did have a kind of a dry run back in, I think it was May 2019, when Alabama became the first state to pass, I think it was a 6-week abortion ban at that time. The ban never actually took effect. It was blocked by the courts, but it really generated a lot of outrage and concern around the world. And we saw a huge increase in media up here as well, and concern about this, could this happen here? But here it's like several times greater than that. And of course, we had another dry run in May in early May when the draft decision was leaked. So it is really quite overwhelming. I've been so busy with media and everything, but we've also had a huge influx of donations, which is a great silver lining, and many other pro-choice groups, same story, big influx in donations, which is very, very helpful around this time, especially if we can help people access abortions. But it's not enough. We need the government to step in, and give millions and millions.
How would you assess what the federal? The prime minister tweets about it and took what I think would be characterized. Although I don't want to put words in your mouth, you say assess it how you like, but a relatively strong or definitive position on it. It seems to me, and I don't think that my conservative friends would take issue with this. I think that people are typically more interested in what conservative politicians have to say about this, because it seems typically it's more conservative or right-leaning parties that may seek to limit a woman's access to abortion. Right? I think that's a fair comment. How would you assess what's been happening with regards to federal political leaders, in particular the prime minister, maybe the deputy prime minister, Freeland, and other political leaders across the country?
Well, Trudeau has always been strong on his rhetoric in terms of defending women's rights to abortion, and he did that again this time. I did detect a bit more, like he was talking a little bit about the need to improve accessibility. So that's a step forward, because, our legal rights in Canada are pretty safe. That's not really the issue. The issue is improving access. And so similar comments from other ministers, including Christopher Freeland, And, but also invitations for Americans to come across the border to Canada, which I thought was a little bit premature in terms of, as I was talking about, how we need to improve access for Canadians first.
Yeah.
And in terms of the Conservative politicians, I think their general response has been, everything's fine as it is. We're not going to change things, or let's not talk about this. And I think that's a real cop-out, because we can't just be happy with the status quo. We have to take a proactive stance, improve access, ramp up capacity so that we can maybe handle some Americans coming up, ensure we have good access across Canada, equalizing. I mean, when Conservatives are in power, they don't even enforce the Canada Health Act at all. So it's a real problem. And I just wanted to mention as well, Pierre Poilievre, if I'm pronouncing his name right, he's I think the front runner for the Conservative Party leadership race. He's going around saying that he's pro-choice. I did some research about a week ago, and in ARC's opinion, he's anti-choice. He's got a consistent anti-choice record going back decades. He's consistently voted in favor of any anti-choice bill or motion that might threaten abortion rights in the past. He's only changed his colors, I think, starting in 2020, when he started, was considering running for the leadership at that time. And he's also got some other right-wing tendencies that we've seen, some questionable things about LGBT rights, medical assistance in dying, hanging out with other right-wing people or whatever. So we don't trust him. We think maybe his rhetoric is just to help him get elected as his party leader. And so we don't want to see him, get elected and then, win the Conservatives, be the prime minister someday, because even though he might not legislate directly against abortion, we think he has anti-choice colors underneath. He would allow private member bills to come forward. And if we ever had a majority Conservative government, they could pass private member bills against abortion.
Yeah, I think back to, recent Conservative prime ministers, like Stephen Harper as an example, who said that wouldn't be something that his government would do, and they didn't. And you sit there and you go, well, yeah, so people would say, well, that would be fear mongering, or that would be rhetoric, and it's not going to happen. And then you look at what happened in the United States right now. And now I guess people kind of feel like all bets are off, like anything can happen now. Nobody expected that to happen in the U.S. either, and yet here we are. And it happened swiftly. Right? I mean, relatively speaking, the Supreme Court gets stacked and then all of a sudden, bang.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can never be sure that it would never happen here. But, they it was a decades-long campaign in the U.S. to get to that point, stacking the Supreme Court and also the state legislatures as well with, Republicans. So we have to just guard against that happening here. But, the way our political structure works, I think it'd be a bit more difficult for it to happen here. The way our Supreme Court appointments are made, for example, and our Supreme Court is pretty liberal at the moment. So I'm not too worried about that, but we always have to remain vigilant and not just assume that our rights are safe, because they never are. Yeah. One thing I've learned about the anti-choice movement is that they're relentless. They'll never give up, and we can never take our rights for granted.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine literally just last night, and she's in a same-sex partnership, and she was saying to me, and Joyce, I think that this, if you're just tuning in, Mixler live streaming audio app, we're talking to Joyce Arthur from the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. Joyce, it's enough of a story to talk about abortion alone. That's enough. It covers enough people. It's relevant to enough people, Lord knows. But my friend last night she says, like, what about, same-sex couples' right to marry? What about, like you just said, medical assistance in dying? Once one domino falls, it's not out of the realm of possibilities to suggest that rights could be rolled back on a number of fronts. And you wonder what that does to the psyche of a population right now, especially people like my pal yesterday. I was talking to her, that's directly impacted by this, in her case, on a couple of fronts.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a whole bunch of other rights that might be implicated here. Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court judge, was hinting at that the right to privacy, which was protecting the right to abortion in Roe v. Wade, also is protecting the right to contraception, as well as gay marriage, and maybe even interracial marriage, which, Clarence Thomas didn't happen to mention, even though he is married to a white woman. So it's very, very disturbing. And I also wanted to mention that it's not even just about abortion, because this is about women's healthcare in general. They're already talking in the states about how, if a state bans abortion, well, you can't really tell the difference between, say, a self-induced abortion by abortion pills and miscarriage. So anyone who has a miscarriage or a pregnancy complication could be suspected of having an abortion. So we're going to start seeing a lot of prosecutions of women, I think. So it's going to be very, very, it's going to be heartbreaking. And I think a lot of people are going to be harmed, and people are going to die, because also when you're forced to carry a pregnancy against your will, pregnancy is dangerous. A lot of people still die, and the U.S. has the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world, and especially for Black women.
Is that right? I didn't realize that. Do you have a couple minutes, Joyce? I wanted to have this. Do you have another interview coming up, or can you spend 2 minutes with us?
Sure.
Yeah. I wanted to just sort of, participate, like the equivalence of like scrolling my social media together. And if something jumps out at you, these are just a few notes I saw. Like I didn't target these people. These are just ones that I pulled as I was scrolling through, and some interesting points to be made to drive this conversation forward. I thought you might have something to say about it. On the Instagram account @feminist, they say, here's an example of policies people will reduce abortion. They say banning abortion, which is obviously not going to work. They say here's policies that would actually reduce abortion. Things like access to free contraceptives, comprehensive sex education, universal health care, paid family leave, welfare funding. They're talking in the United States here, ending housing insecurity, closing the wage gap, and funding education. Anything in particular jump out at you that you think it's something we should be having more of a national conversation about?
Certainly all of those things, yes, would help to reduce the abortion rate or reduce the unwanted pregnancy rate. And obviously, we can look at those things as well in Canada, and there's always room for improvement. I think we're a few steps ahead of the U.S. on some of those issues. Luckily, we do have the universal health care. And it's funny because in the U.S., they compare the U.S. laws to Europe, saying, well, Europe has stricter abortion laws than the U.S. does. But Western Europe has universal health care. They have all these supports for families. And they have parental leave and all kinds of things, which the U.S. does not have. The U.S. does not have these supports in place. And I hear some talk now from like the anti-choice movement in the U.S. Okay, it's time to ramp up. We have to support families, but that's not going to happen. Republicans don't believe in supporting families. They don't believe in welfare. So we're going to have a situation where not only can people not access abortion care or maybe other reproductive health care, they're not going to have any supports to raise the children that they're forced to have, and it's going to drive people deeper into poverty. And have all kinds of really negative outcomes for people. So I'm really worried about that.
Let's take a look at a couple other comments that we've noted online. Here's another one picked up off social media. This from Carlos Chapman, a law professor at Washington and Lee University. She says, if a fetus is a person at 6 weeks pregnant, is that when child support starts? Is that also when you can't deport the mother because she's carrying an American citizen? Can I insure a 6-week fetus and collect if I miscarry? Just figuring if we're going to go there, we should go all in. From Professor. I mean, that was an interesting take there.
Well, yeah, I've looked at this whole issue of fetal personhood, and it devolves into the absurdities that you was just describing. You can't define it. It's impossible. Basically, if you make a fetus a whole person with full human rights, you have to take away all those rights from women. They become non-persons, literally. And we also see that even if you try to balance rights, like they did in Ireland with their 8th Amendment, the medical professionals will always try and prioritize the fetus first at the expense of the woman's health and even life. And people have died. That woman died in Ireland a few years ago. And when people have died in Poland recently with their abortion ban as well, because doctors prioritize the fetus. And that's what happens when you give a fetus any rights at all. Downgrades the woman's rights, and suddenly she's not a full human being anymore.
Here were a few other thoughts that I thought might resonate with people. This is from Cher. Everybody knows Cher. Says, if every time men had sex, they risked death, physical disability, a life-altering interruption in their education or career, and the sudden lifelong responsibility for another human being, I think they'd expect a choice in the matter. That from Cher. Here's one from the account Death Metal Viking. They say unborn babies are sacred, but elementary school children are collateral damage for the Second Amendment. How do we ignore that dichotomy? And Stephen Loudons, a known Canadian commentator, says, for years, every time I bring up the danger of the anti-abortion voices within the Conservative Party of Canada, Conservatives have said I'm fear-mongering because the right to choose is, quote, settled law. And they're very quiet now. Joyce, it's what we just kind of talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to be vigilant because when the Conservatives say nothing to worry about, that's when we need to start worrying. And yeah, I mean, the whole thing about, fetuses and protecting them. Sorry, I lost the train of thought. I wanted to talk about the guy that you said the comment after Cher. What was that?
We can bring that one up. No problem. Right after Cher, we had this one. Cher said men would expect a choice in the matter. And then the next one from Death Metal Viking.
Oh, yeah. basically the anti-choice movement, they enshrine the fetus as something sacred, worthy of protection. But it's very easy for them because the fetus doesn't talk back, and they can feel they can speak for the fetus. There's no collateral damage for them. But as soon as someone's born, suddenly it doesn't matter. You're on your own. And it's like the Republican mantra is like self-sufficiency. You have to fend for yourself. So they don't believe in any government supports, and they also believe that the husband is the head of the family, and so they should take care of the family themselves. And it's just a really backwards, traditional, sexist, patriarchal view, because it really is about, as Cheryl was saying, it really is about controlling women. That's what the base is. It's not about saving babies. It's about controlling women and trying to put things back into the traditional patriarchal order where women are inferior.
Joyce, you had mentioned, you said that the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, in closing here, you said you've been seeing an uptick in donations. People can check out what you do just by Googling Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. We'll link to your website in the description here in the podcast and on YouTube, or it's just arcc-cdac.ca. Where do these donations go? What do you do? What can you describe some of your advocacy efforts and what's keeping you busiest these days?
Well, we are basically a political advocacy group, so we do lobbying work and a lot of communications work with the public, just sort of educational work. So we are a virtual group. We try and keep our expenses low. So we're going to be building up our capacity, hiring more people to help with everything, all the different projects. We have a lot of research projects going on. We work jointly with other groups and other activists. We research the anti-choice movement a lot. For example, the crisis pregnancy centers, these places that refuse to, or try to dissuade people from having abortion, and other things that we're working on. Like recently, I was updating all the statuses of the anti-choice MPs in Parliament, so we can keep track of their stances for help people vote during elections. So we're not a charity; we do political work, but I think we go a long ways on the budget that we have, and so we're really thankful for any donations.
Can I let me ask you this? I know I promised we'd let you go here, but you teed something up, and relatively close to our home, we see this. There's a women's health clinic, and then directly north of them, there's one of these crisis pregnancy centers. It's an interesting sort of a neighborly relationship. I don't know how neighborly it is, but I saw somebody, and I have not fact checked this. I do not know if this is true, but in correspondence to the show, somebody said there are more crisis pregnancy centers in Canada than there are women's health clinics that are offering abortions. Maybe you have insight in that. Can these crisis pregnancy centers provide a service, like provide supports, help with sort of adoption relations, that sort of a thing? Or in your perspective, are they inherently negative? Or what's your take on those centers? I've never asked somebody this before.
Well, yes, there are more of those centers than abortion clinics. There's about 148 or so in Canada. We've been studying this. And they're often in many communities. Sometimes we'll set up near or next to an abortion clinic. One example is Fredericton, where the Clinic 554, the clinic right next door, is a house that houses one of these crisis pregnancy centers. And, I think they set themselves up. If you look at their websites, it looks very sleek and very nice. It will help you with all options, and unbiased information. But really what they do, their main goal is to kind of stop people from having abortions. And they try and lure people in on the basis of, we'll help you. And then they do give help. For example, they give out like free diapers and baby supplies and clothing and things like that. They might have different classes, parenting classes, but they often offer post-abortion support, they call it, because they believe that abortion harms women. So they want to help women recover from the trauma of abortion. Most people don't regret their abortion at all. So there's issues like that. And I used to think that, well, at least they do help people, who want to be pregnant. They, help them with supplies and things like that. But, often comes with strings attached. People have to attend classes to earn, these donation things. And also everything comes with this dose of, it's all undergirded by this traditional Christian morality, sexual morality, traditional kind of sexist morality. There's no room for like LGBT people and things like that. They'll tell, if a woman is living common law with her boyfriend, they'll tell her that, she should stop having sex with him and things like that. So it's, I think the whole thing is kind of poisoned by this underlying conservative philosophy that's really can do harm.
Joyce Arthur is the founder and executive director of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, protects the legal right to abortion on request. You can find them on Twitter at Abortion Rights. Joyce, thanks so much for making time for us from Vancouver this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. Talk at ryanjesperson.com is where you can send us your thoughts. I always want to hear from people, whether, people have been sharing. It's been remarkable to see people come forward, especially known people. You might use the word celebrities coming forward too and saying, I had my abortion in this year. This is why it was a challenge for me, or this is why it was important to me, or this is how it impacted my life. People are telling their stories. I think more openly, people are sensing that it's more important now to talk about it, perhaps than ever before. If that resonates with you, if you have a story you'd like to share with us as you feel led, talk at ryanjesperson.com. If you feel like perhaps your belief system, or maybe it's your political affiliation, is being unfairly represented in conversations, we're always curious to hear from people that say, hey, listen, this is how I vote, or this is what I believe, but here's where I stand on this issue. If it's unconventional, unusual, if you think it's something that would prompt the Real Talk audience to think, we invite those comments. And those are the ones that remind us that we're doing important work here, getting people thinking about issues that truly matter. The conversations happen because we have sponsors that believe in the importance of Real Talk, and that includes the teams at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. I want to remind you, you're going to find the best selection of Jeeps in the province of Alberta at these two dealerships. Why? Number one, because they've got a big footprint. And number two, same ownership groups means that they can share inventory. So if they don't have your exact perfect fit in St. Albert, they'll find it in Sherwood Park, and vice versa. Maybe that's the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer that everybody's talking about, the Grand Wagoneer. Unbelievable. Jeep's re-entry into the luxury full-size SUV class. Of course, there's the Grand Cherokee as well, America's best-selling SUV, North America, that is, since it was first introduced. If you're downsizing, too, based on the price of fuel, they can help you out there. You wouldn't be alone. You can find those dealerships under the Sponsors tab on our website at ryanjesperson.com. It's also where you'll find Friesen Brothers, a reminder that today, people are looking at these blazing savings that are coming up. These are the next couple weeks. Yeah, Johnny, let's talk about this. These are Alberta-made dog treats that they've got there, right?
Yeah.
It's the sales that are going to draw people into Friesen Brothers, and then once you're in there, oh boy, oh boy. I talked to somebody the other day that said, I went to Friesen Brothers in South Edmonton for the first time. And I went, and he goes to me, it's like not even a grocery store. He goes, it's more than a grocery store.
That's our spot.
That's what I've been telling you. That's what I've been telling you since the beginning.
My wife calls it a classier Walmart because it really has those sections for everything. Like, she's over here, she's buying.
You're looking for this, you're going to find it.
Yeah, she's buying beauty products, she's buying food, she's
amazing.
buying, everything.
Yeah, I did a pork belly over the weekend. I did it like burnt ends style on the recommendation of a buddy. Although I will be honest, no, I'm not going to get into this. Not with the vegan. It wouldn't be fair. I was going to get a little bit. I was going to talk about the prep, but I don't want to talk about the prep. I was going to say I'm going to lean on the Friesen Brothers Butchers a little bit more next time.
We had plant-based steak last weekend.
What's that made out of?
So it's a mixture of pea protein, jackfruit, all sorts of I gotta start bringing these things in and showing you.
We do. Well, we'll have a barbecue together, and what I'm doing is inviting myself over to your house, and it'll be fueled by Friesen Brothers. I hope you caught the 15% off first of the month. If not, make sure you mark it August 1st, the next one. Purchases of $75 or more, 15% off at Friesen Brothers. Well, it's obvious that cost of living is through the roof. You take a look at inflation numbers right now, and they're the highest that they've been in years. As a matter of fact, they're the highest they've been in decades. People are paying more for everyday things like groceries and fuel and heating their homes, and it seems like costs are up, and at the same time, let me guess, you're not getting a 7% raise year over year at your job, right? You might worry about what your tax liability looks like as well. Are you going to be paying more or the same as before? People are talking about things like de-indexation. How much does the average person actually know about any of that? Well, I'm grateful for our next guest who's joining us to help us make sense of all of this and better understand what's happening around us. Dr. Gillian Petit is a research associate at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. Her PhD from the University of Calgary Department of Economics and a JD from Queen's University. She knows what she's talking about. Her research focuses on income supports and tax policy in Canada. Dr. Petit, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. How are you doing?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Now, you see this happen all around you as well, I guess, just as a civilian. as like a so-called taxpayer, as a normal human being walking the face of planet Earth, you're paying attention to the news cycle. But of course, this is also on your radar in much more of a sort of a hyper acute way, isn't it? You're studying trends and helping us make sense of them.
That's true. That's true. I also have two little kids here at home, so I can tell you prices are definitely increasing.
Yeah, where are you noticing it? I mean, just the other day, I filled up my truck with gas and it was 200 plus, and I just went, this is like, I can't even really wrap my mind around it. What's been causing you to take pause?
Well, gas, but I have a little one who's still on formula. The formula prices are through the roof.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't even thought about too. And this is like for a lot of people, especially with new family members, these tiny little new arrivals costs oftentimes the pocketbook's being strained more than it ever has before, right? I mean, that's something that families really feel the pinch on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're taking a look, you and your colleague, Dr. Lindsay Tedds, another economist at the University of Calgary, took a look at the implications of taxation without indexation in Alberta. And we already know how it's going to go, Dr. Petit. Some people, their eyes are going to start to glaze over because they're going to go, I don't understand what this means. I don't understand how this is relevant to me. I asked you in an email to you somewhat jokingly, but serious, can you dumb this down for people like me who don't fully understand what we're talking about? This is finding a mix between tax liability, finding a fair relationship between inflation and what people pay in taxes, right?
Right. That's right. So let me just start by explaining what we mean by indexation. So in non-simple terms, indexation is the adjustment of tax brackets for inflation. So I'll try to make this a little bit more easy to digest with a quick example here. So suppose we have a taxpayer who in 2019 is making $131,000. Yeah, in Alberta, at the Alberta provincial tax rate, this taxpayer would be paying 10% in Alberta provincial taxes. So let's also say that we have an inflation rate of 2%, which in a normal year would be normal inflation, not normal now, but let's say we have normal inflation of 2%. All right. And let's say also, probably not quite correct, but let's pretend our taxpayer, his wages also go up by the same rate of inflation by 2%. So now our taxpayer is making $134,000 a year. So before taxes, our taxpayer can purchase the same basket of goods and services in 2019 that he can in 2020, even though there's been inflation because his wages increased. But now we have to factor in taxes. So because in Alberta, our tax brackets aren't indexed to inflation, this particular taxpayer will be paying higher real taxes, meaning instead of just paying 10% in taxes, our taxpayer has moved into the next tax bracket and it's going to be paying 12% in Alberta provincial taxes. So while their before tax income, their real tax income stayed the same, their after tax income has actually declined. So if we want to put this into some real numbers here, in 2020, the average Albertan's taxes increased by about $51 because tax brackets weren't indexed. By 2023, we project that depending on the rate of inflation, the average Albertan's taxes will increase by between $235 and $291 because of this de-indexation of tax brackets.
Do you think the average person notices this? Do you think this is on the average person's radar if we're not having conversations like this?
I honestly don't think so. So the way that most of us see our taxes is a lot of us, when we get our paychecks, our taxes are withheld off of our paycheck.
Yeah.
And as our incomes, as our wages increase, or as the tax brackets increase, it's just withheld off our paychecks. And I think, the average Albertan, I study taxes, and I don't think I even see it really. I don't think about it really off of my paycheck, but it does result in less money in our pockets each paycheck.
So how is the current provincial government approaching this, and how might you compare that, if you're able to, with regards to what's happening in other provinces? Right.
So there hasn't been anything said on the Alberta front on what will happen, whether the Alberta tax brackets will be indexed again. Other provinces and the federal government index their tax brackets. Although I know that in Alberta, it's generally claimed that we pay a lower personal income tax rate for high income earners who make about, $200,000 to $10,000 a year. This is generally true. For our low income persons, not necessarily as true.
What would this do on the? I mean, obviously, you might just say, well, obviously, people would pay less taxes, and maybe that's a one sentence answer. But would this to so-called, what do you say, like re-index it? If you re-index it, what's the impact on the lowest income earners and even for like the average middle class family?
Right. So for low income earners, if you earn beneath a particular amount of income, you don't have to pay taxes. So in Alberta, if you earn below about $19,300, you didn't have to pay any provincial tax. So that's just the provincial taxes. This rate in 2019 was frozen at this $19,300. So if we were to re-index our taxes again, this means that this income threshold would increase, so that people earning below about $21,000 won't have to pay taxes.
Which is a big deal. If you're making 20 grand a year, that's a big deal, right?
It's a big deal. It's a big deal jumping from zero taxes to a 10% tax.
Yeah, we
rate.
hear about some people talking about it. It's always, for me, it's like it has an impact where someone will say that their income changed $20 or $25 over the course of a month, and it impacts their household. And it's just like, I think it's so important for members of the general public to hear something like that reality check, to understand what navigating life looks like for some people, especially people on a fixed income, where stuff like this, we think about tax policy, political policy, and a lot of people, it's kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher. They're not really paying attention. They look at their pay stub. If it looks within the ballpark of where they think it should be, they don't pay much attention, right? But this stuff really matters, and it's a really big deal. Can reindexing actually have an impact on inflation?
So if we were to reindex our tax brackets, it would result in more money in Albertans' pockets, for which they could use to spend and purchase other goods and services. So this would increase demand, right? But this isn't an argument against this type of reindexation. So quite frankly, Alberta is a very small economy, on a global scale.
Relatively, yeah.
Even Canada is a small economy on a global scale. Reindexing income tax thresholds in Alberta is not going to have an effect on global oil prices, which is a relatively large component driving inflation right now. So no, it would not affect inflation.
Okay. So you and Dr. Ted's released this paper, Tax Policy Trends. People can Google it, Implications of Taxation Without Indexation in Alberta. Do you come to and here's where you get put on the spot. Do you come to a conclusion? Is there a call to action? Is there like a proposed policy that you think is intuitive moving forward? What's ultimately the finding of this exploration?
Well, given the recent Alberta budget surplus and given the increased costs of living, our recommendation would be that the Alberta government re-index all tax credits and all income tax thresholds back to the rate of inflation. So back in 2019, they didn't just freeze income tax thresholds. They also froze things like the Alberta Child and Family Benefit. This is a tax credit to low-income families with children. They froze, like I said, the basic personal exemption amount, which is the amount below which people don't have to pay taxes. So re-indexing all of these would help put money back in Albertans' pockets for everyone who's a taxpayer.
And now's the time to do it, right? Like,
absolutely,
the government's reporting a surplus after some years of deficit spending and or deficit budgets, let me just say, and now certainly the time, I think, for a lot of people to make a pretty compelling case to right the ship, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Right. In 2019, we were having, some budget issues. So maybe, policy-wise, freezing them made sense. but it just doesn't make that same sense anymore under the current economic climate.
Yeah, and it's tougher politically for the government to get away with not doing it. So now's the time for people to apply that pressure. Always easier to apply pressure with data and research backing it. Dr. Petit, we're so grateful for this. People can check out what you and your colleagues are doing at policyschool.ca. And, of course, they can follow you on Twitter by checking out our tweet from our official account at Real Talk RJ. We announce all of our guests there. Dr. Gillian Petit, a research associate at the University of Calgary School of Public Policy, an economist there. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You can let us know where you think what you think about this. I thought that formula example was a good one as well. I'm always curious to see from people what's the one thing like where your pocketbook just got hammered in the last little while, or something where you went whoa. And a lot of people right now, these are things like it impacts the everyday life stuff. Like, what does your summer vacation look like?
Yeah,
where are you going to go? People like air travel right now seems to be a total nightmare. I don't know if that has to do necessarily with cost. That has to do more with.
Get on a plane. Right
oh my gosh, sounds like it's people are getting stranded everywhere, and then you go, oh well, we'll drive somewhere, we'll go camping, we'll pull our trailer somewhere. Well, I don't know about that. And then I don't know if anybody feels sorry for the folks with like the $185,000 wakeboard boats, but even then,
they're hurting too.
They're hurting too. They barely have time to chill the bottles of champagne after a long day out on shoe swap in their Mastercraft. But even seriously then, like I'm not trying to be an idiot, but even then, like running big, I mean, this sounds like a bit of a ridiculous example, but I've got friends that they will run their boat all day long. Yeah. Things like that, you got to start thinking about that now. Like people will go out wakeboarding for a week on shoe swap and spend like $1,000 on fuel. Is that going to be $2,000 now?
Yeah.
And then if it's $2,000, can you afford to rent the cabin? And if you can't afford to rent the cabin, can you do the whatever? And there's going to be other people writing in saying, dude, I can't even afford fresh bread for my family. Like, fuck off with your stories about the shoe swap and running your V8 Mastercrafts or whatever motors those have. I don't know. Believe it or not, I don't own one.
Just little things. Like we bought avocados the other day. Not at Freezing Bros, a different supermarket. But we were like,
Judas.
Is this the price for 3? Like 3 avocados? Like,
yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's going up all over the place, and people can, and that's why I wanted to ask her, like, where does she notice it, right? Like, because everyone's going to notice in their own world, which costs went up in their world.
Weekly costs, right? Gas, groceries, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I see a debate going on in our live chat about a flat tax.
I see that.
Oh, boy. I once was put on the spot on a previous talk radio show that I hosted, and somebody called in. We used to take live callers. I love that stuff, but you never know what you're getting into, right? And this person called in and said, if you were premier, what would your tax policy be? And I was sort of like, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I just sort of threw something out there. And I said, I think probably I would introduce a sales tax in Alberta, and I would balance it out by reintroducing a flat rate income tax. And
that's not a bad idea.
Well, yeah, I thought so. And then it started like a forest fire. It started like a wildfire because, people make compelling points on it. Some people will say, well, the most fair thing to do is a flat income tax. Everybody pays 10%. So whether you make, $19,300 a year or whether you make 1.9 million, you pay 10%, and everybody pays 10%, so it's fair.
Yeah.
And then other people will say, well, yeah, but 10% coming out of the pockets of somebody making $19,000 is a way bigger sacrifice for them. It's a big chunk for them, bigger chunk than 10% coming out of the pockets of the person making $2 million.
Yeah.
Right. And then you also look at a sales tax, and I try to hear both sides on this stuff. I try to hear all the sides and sort of sort out for myself. It's the bedrock upon which this show is built. Draw your own conclusions with as much information as possible. But people will say as well, sales taxes can disproportionately impact people on the sort of the lower end of that income earning scale, right? Because you sit there as a consumer tax. You can talk about things like luxury tax. You want to tax like Mercedes and Mastercraft ski boats and things like that, fancy vacations or whatever. You can have these so-called luxury taxes, these consumer taxes, but a sales tax at an entry level is more punitive to lower income earners. So these are important things to think about, and appreciate your feedback on all of the stuff that we cover, all the ground we covered. Before we get to sort of a celebratory tradition that we have on Tuesdays where we get inspired and we learn about people that are doing amazing things in their community, I want to remind you what's happening with our friends at Infinity Healthcare. These home support services that we know that thousands and thousands of families across this country, including our home province, are relying on to know that their loved ones are getting the care that they need. Well, what does home health care or companion care look like? Well, number one, and you can check it all out at infinity-8 Companionship. It's as simple as a conversation, interaction with mom or dad, grandma, grandpa. Maybe it's a sibling of yours. What about meal preparation, cleaning, pet care? Like, is the dog getting out for a walk? Is there quality of life for the pets in the house? Laundry services, yard maintenance, errands, grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions. Services include what you need them to include because it is customized, reliable care with Infinity Healthcare. You can find them online. They're operating in Edmonton, St. Albert, Sherwood Park, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, Calgary, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Red Deer, Lloydminster, Banff. As a matter of fact, the entire province of Alberta. If you're in a community where they're not yet operating, they're going to work to find a home care professional, maybe an LPN or other, that can come and do the work that you need them to do. Your family needs them. You'll find Infinity Healthcare online under the sponsors tab on our website. That's also where you'll find the team at Eden Landscaping. I was telling you, we're thrilled to see Mike. He's the owner-operator of Eden Landscaping. He and his wife out there having just an absolute blast at our Real Talk Golf Classic. It was so good to see them there. A custom landscape builder with more than 20 years of on-the-ground experience in Edmonton and area. We're talking about all this rain. I wonder what it's doing for Mike and his team, hey? 'Tis the season for big excavations. They're putting in their retaining walls right now, pouring a whole bunch of concrete. They do those beautiful water features. You can learn how they work by following the link. How do they make visions come to life? You'll find Eden Landscaping online at landscapeedmonton.ca. John, what do you want us talking about with regards to dealer's choice on the Dairy Queen front today? Yeah, I want to give you some opportunity as we celebrate the availability of essentially, in my mind, maybe some of the greatest signature stack burgers, the best chicken baskets, and of course, the legendary blizzards at the Dairy Queens at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. Dealer's choice today is
something new.
Ooh, sweet summer sips. I love this. A s'mores shake, a poolside punch, twisty misty slush. Twisty Misty, what a band name.
I feel like that's our order right there. You'd have the s'mores shake, I'd have the poolside punch.
Would s'mores shake open for Twisty Misty at the music festival, or would Twisty Misty open for s'mores shake? I feel like s'mores shake is the name of the album released by Twisty Misty.
The artist formerly known.
The artist formerly known as Twisty
Poolside
Misty
Punch.
Slush. You can find them in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Baseline Road. You let those Dairy Queen owner-operators know you're there because you heard about them on Real Talk. And a warm welcome this week to our friends at Apex Automation. We're so thrilled to add them to our roster, our team, our family of sponsors that make Real Talk happen. We're going to learn a lot more about what Apex Automation does in the weeks and months to come. But today, I want to mention their careers link at apexautomation.ca. If you're looking to explore your career at Apex, people matter. Now, why would you want to work at Apex? Well, their company culture is unbelievable. Their perks and benefits are leading, and their learning and development. They support your professional development through education and mentorship. You can learn why Apex Automation is establishing itself as a formidable force in automation in Canada by visiting apexautomation.ca today. Every Tuesday, our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy provide an opportunity for us to focus on a game changer, on a person or organization, a group that's achieving positive things in their own backyard. We call it the Leading Edge. And on the Leading Edge this week, we're thrilled to introduce you to Breast Friends. Yeah, this is so cool. This is the Breast Friends Edmonton Dragon Boat Racing Team. It's made up of people in Edmonton, surrounding communities from every walk of life, varying fitness levels, which is super cool, but they have one thing in common. They are all breast cancer survivors. Every single member of the team proves day in, day out that life can be full, vigorous, and filled with joy after a diagnosis of breast cancer. Oh, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they out on the water together? Well, they want to encourage people that have been diagnosed, obviously. They want to demonstrate the benefits of an active lifestyle through the amazing sport of dragon boating. They want to raise awareness about breast cancer, provide support and fellowship to team members, and oh yeah, they love to have fun. So if you know someone, or maybe this is you, have been diagnosed with breast cancer, if you're 3 months post-treatment, you can join the team. It could be women or men, any type of breast cancer. You got to be 18 or over to participate. And how cool is this? The social angle, they send crews to 5 or 6 festivals every summer, and every 4 years they attend the International Breast Cancer Paddling Commission. It's a participatory festival. This is a really neat opportunity, including the Edmonton Dragon Boat Festival. That's coming up in August. This is such a neat organization. Leading Edge Physiotherapy, now a sponsor of Breast Friends, Edmonton Dragon Boat Racing Team, and they've got an upcoming weekend planned where the staff's going to try the dragon boats out. You can follow Leading Edge Physiotherapy on social media to check that out. And check out leadingedgephysio.com while you're at it. Leading Edge Physio, life shouldn't hurt. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to get back into a conversation about political leadership, but from a different angle. Dr. Lisa Young's going to join me, a political scientist who you've seen on the show before. She wrote a piece a while ago in the CBC. Remember we talked about it on the show, the concept of the glass cliff, women in leadership positions essentially being set up to fail when it comes to those leaderships. I mean, Kim Campbell is an example. What about Manitoba's new premier? What might happen here on the prairies? What might happen federally speaking? Dr. Young with some great outlook there. Plus, we're going to continue as this week moves on our conversations around online safety, not just for kids. What do adults need to know too? We want to make sure you're equipped with the knowledge you need. Make it a great day.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer, Josh Dunford. Technical producer, John Hicks. General manager, Katie Cook-Shivers. Account coordinator, Lawrence Derlego. Human resources, Lena Shepard. Website design, Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.